Hello everyone, I'm Alex Dykes, and today we are out here in San Antonio taking a look at the 2016 QX60. For 2016, Infiniti has gone back and refreshed the QX60 to tweak some of the things that a few people complained about in the previous generation. Now, if you recall, the QX60 was originally called the JX35, and then Infiniti went back and renamed their crossover lineup. For 2016, most of the changes outside have to do with this entirely new front end. We get new headlamps that have this more Angry Birds theme going on here, and we have a grille that ties us in a little bit better with the rest of the Infiniti lineup. Now, 2016 is a refresh, not a redesign, so the dimensions of the QX60 remain about the same. In addition, things like the drivetrain and the overall feel of the QX60 have not substantially changed for this model year. At 196.4 inches long, the QX60 is still one of the larger entries in this particular segment. This is about 2 inches longer than the recently redesigned Volvo XC90, about 3 inches longer than the Acura MDX. This is, of course, still about 4 inches shorter than something like a Buick Enclave, which is one step down the ladder. Infiniti has also changed the back end of the QX60 just about as much as they changed the front. We have more chrome going on back here, including this chrome strip that goes from one tail lamp onto the other. These tail lamps also are a little bit more unifying with the rest of the Infiniti brand. They have that same sort of Angry Birds theme going on that we see up front. Although we still have only one hidden exhaust tip right over here on the passenger side, the overall look of the rear end is less minivanish than it was before. We definitely have more things breaking up the expanse of the rear. This tailgate is now a little bit more visually interesting. They've of course made the rear bumper look a little bit taller with this blacked out portion below. 2016 doesn't bring anything new under the hood. We still find the same 3.5-liter V6 engine under here, making 265 horsepower. Fuel economy is also the same as it was last year. Now, there has been some speculation about the hybrid version leaving us for 2016, and that's not happening. You will still find the optional supercharged 2.5-liter 5-cylinder engine and an electric motor under the hood in the hybrid model, making a combined 250 horsepower. Now, if your local Infiniti dealer doesn't have any hybrid models on the lot, that shouldn't surprise you. Infiniti says that in certain areas of the country, your dealers may have to order the hybrid model, but it is still available for sale. The reason is that all QX60s sold everywhere in the world are actually made right here in the United States in Tennessee. And at the moment, the hybrid model is essentially the only QX60 available in China, so all Chinese QX60s made in the US yet again are that hybrid model. They're making them here in the US, so they do sell them in the US if you want one. Front seat comfort comparisons really depend on what you're comparing the QX60 to. These seats score very well when you compare them to the Acura MDX or the Buick Enclave or your average 3-row crossover in the mass market segment. However, you will still find more comfortable and more adjustable seats in the BMW, the Audi, or the Volvo. The difference in adjustability is noticeable right here on the driver's seat where we have a two-way adjustable lumbar support, or over here on the passenger seat where it doesn't have the same range of motion or any adjustable lumbar support like the driver's seat does. The Infiniti's second row, however, is positively enormous and very comfortable. These rear seats are adjustable for recline. They also scoot forward and backward nearly 6 inches from one to the other. That allows you to apportion the space between the first, second, and third row a little bit more equitably. Second row passengers do get a large armrest with 2 fixed cup holders right there. Now, unlike the Europeans, you will not find a 40-20-40 folding second row seat. But the QX60 does have a trick up its sleeve, because this 40% side that I'm sitting in right here on the passenger side of the vehicle moves in a different manner than this outboard seat to get into the third row. For third row access on the driver's side of the vehicle, the seat bottom cushion flips up, this folds forward, and the whole unit collapses towards the front of the vehicle. On the passenger side, this seat moves in a slightly different manner. The seat bottom cushion goes towards the floor at the same time the seat back tilts forward. That allows you to keep a forward-facing child seat in position, obviously unoccupied, while you then get into the third row. That's not something you can do in any other entry in this particular segment. All those other vehicles out there, you would have to unlatch the child seat. Now, you cannot use the shoulder belt with the child seat in that fashion. You would have to use the latch anchors. Where Infiniti really shines is back here in this third row, because I have significantly more legroom than we find in every other entry in this segment, especially the European entries, which are a little bit smaller. The seat bottom cushion is a little bit close to the ground for adults, but the front seat is all the way back in its tracks. I comfortably sat in the second row and adjusted it for me, and as you can see, I have about 2 inches of legroom left here in the third row. Third row passengers get hard plastic armrests and 4 cup holders total in the rear. We no longer find air vents in this third row, however. We now have USB charging ports instead. Infiniti claims that the removal of the air vents has actually allowed them to improve cabin cooling overall for all 3 rows. The overall style of the cabin has not changed appreciably for 2016, although the interior parts quality certainly has. The 2015 QX60 actually used a hard plastic dashboard, which is a little bit unusual in this segment. This now uses a soft touch injection molded model that has then been after stitched with this contrasting stitching. We have basically the same infotainment and navigation system we had last year. It's controlled via this button and knob arrangement right here on the dashboard. Again, more real wood trim going on there. Below that, you'll find the optical disc player, the controls for the radio system, and then a small storage cubby. Continuing on behind that, we have an all-new shifter. This is going to be shared with all the rest of the Infiniti models, and we'll also see it in the brand new Q60 Coupe. Two very large cup holders right here, and a closable lid if you don't want to see those cup holders. Behind that, we have the controls for our heated and ventilated seats, and the drive mode selector, which allows us to choose between sport, normal, eco, and snow. This affects the way the transmission and the all-wheel drive system behave. We again have a soft touch large center armrest that is split into two different compartments. We have the large compartment down there, and we have a smaller one right up here. The 4-needle instrument cluster is essentially the same as we had last year, with a tachometer on the left and the speedometer there on the right. Between the two, we have a multifunction LCD controlled via a button and knob on the steering wheel that allows us to switch between the status of our safety systems, our trip computer information, tire pressure, fuel economy, that sort of thing. You use the buttons on the left side of the steering wheel to control that multifunction display. We have up, down, enter, page change, and a back button. This also functions as track up and down. We have a volume up, down button right over here, source change, voice command button, phone hang up button right over here. And then on the left side of the steering wheel, we have a button to enable and disable all the active driving aids, cruise control, and of course our model does have the radar adaptive cruise control, so we have a distance button there and our typical cruise control controls. The steering wheel itself is one of Infiniti's older 4-spoke designs. We have these large spokes right down here at the bottom and sort of a roundish airbag in the middle. They've also moved the driver memory buttons from right down here where my knee kept hitting them to right up here just below the door handle. One of the major changes for the 2016 QX60 is with the suspension. Infiniti has tweaked the suspension, giving this 10% less body roll than before. They've also firmed things up a little bit. That means that it's actually easier to feel small road imperfections in this 2016 model than it was in the 2015 model. Now, that does not mean they've turned the QX60 into an Acura MDX. This is still a decent amount softer and has a much better ride than the Acura or the Volvo or the Audi Q7. However, they have firmed things up a bit. Now, on the downside, it means that we feel minor road imperfections a little bit more than we did in the 2015 model. Infiniti claims that they have also reduced the body roll by about 10% in this model. When it comes to acceleration, nothing has changed for this year. We have the same engine, we have the same CVT under the hood. This CVT will imitate stepped automatic transmission shifts depending on the transmission mode that you're in, but in general it feels like every other Nissan or Infiniti CVT. Infiniti has also fitted a different and more sporty steering rack to the QX60. This now takes fewer turns to go from lock to lock, and that would be all the way to the left versus all the way to the right. That steering ratio change and the suspension tweaks that they made to give this vehicle less body roll than before certainly makes this car feel more responsive out on the road. This is not going to be as engaging as a BMW X5, obviously, but it is more engaging than the 2015 QX60. The best analogy I could give for the 2015 model versus the 2016 model is that this vehicle feels sort of like Infiniti has added a sport pack to it, because the amount of change from 2015 to 2016 is approximately the same as we see in BMW models that go from a regular entry to their M Sport entry. It's not a massive change. They really just tightened up every aspect of the QX60's driving dynamics. As I've said frequently, ride and handling are two ends of the same teeter-totter. So while they have reduced the ride quality a little bit in the QX60, they have improved the handling. They've also improved the cabin noise score. They've made this about 1 decibel quieter than it was last year. The way they did that was by adding laminated glass to the front windows. Laminated glass helps reduce wind noise and sound transmission through the glass. That means that the back seats are no quieter than they were before, but up here in the front, it does reduce that cabin noise by about 1 decibel or 2. Because Infiniti didn't really change anything under the hood, we still get excellent fuel economy even though this model is an all-wheel drive V6. I recently had a 2015 QX60 in Colorado. I put about 700 miles on it going up and over the Continental Divide twice, and I averaged 22.5 miles per gallon in that all-wheel drive version. Fuel economy in these CVT-equipped vehicles is excellent. A lot of people tend to complain about the way that CVTs behave, but CVTs do improve fuel economy. They also help out acceleration. So if this vehicle had a traditional 6-speed automatic and the same engine, it would accelerate from 0 to 60 slower than this. Now, even so, at 7 seconds 0 to 60 for the 2015 model, it is one of the slower entries in this segment. It's right about the same as Volvo's base 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder. On the flip side, of course, this CVT is much smoother than the 9-speed automatic transmission that you do find in the current generation Acura MDX, and when you're climbing up steep mountain grades like I was doing in Colorado, the CVT really pays dividends by allowing the engine to be in a very meaty power band the whole time, so you don't have that same slow down, downshift, speed up, upshift thing going on that you would see in a regular automatic. Overall, this refresh of the QX60 polishes up the driving dynamics without taking too big of a hit on the ride. This is still one of the softer and more plush rides in this particular segment. If you want something even softer than this, you will have to get something like a Buick Enclave, although the Enclave is not as luxurious overall as the QX. Pricing is fairly simple with the QX60 because there aren't as many standalone options as you'll find in the Europeans. The base 3.5-liter V6 model in front-wheel drive form starts at $43,595. If you want all-wheel drive like our model has right here, that's an additional $1,800. Very much like Acura's MDX, the QX60 does not go quite as high as the European options either. This tops out right around $55,000 for the regular 3.5-liter V6 model. If you want the hybrid QX60, that will set you back $53,045. That may seem like a significant increase over last year. However, the hybrid model now comes with more standard features than it did last year, so it really isn't that much of an increase. In fact, depending on how you configure your QX60, this could be either $200 more expensive than last year or about $300 less than last year because of the way that Infiniti has readjusted their option packages. Even at $53,045, the QX60 is significantly less expensive than Volvo's plug-in hybrid XC90. Of course, this does not come in plug-in form, it only comes in regular hybrid form, but you will still pay an awful lot more for that Volvo. When it comes to comparisons, the important thing to keep in mind with the Infiniti QX60 is that even though they have improved the driving dynamics for 2016, this is still one of the softer and more comfortable entries in this segment. That's really the biggest differentiator between this and the Acura MDX. The MDX is trying to be an awful lot sportier than the QX60 is, even though again this does have those improved driving dynamics and that new steering rack. The Acura MDX has a stiffer suspension, its 9-speed automatic transmission is not as smooth as this continuously variable transmission under the hood, and the overall personality of the car is a little bit sportier. This is definitely on the luxurious side. You'll also find real wood trim inside this cabin, and you won't find that at any price in the Acura. The biggest difference, of course, is going to be right back here in the second row. The QX60 has more legroom than we find in the MDX, the seats are more comfortable, and you can keep a child seat strapped into this 40% side of the 60/40 folding second row and still access the third row. You can't do that in the MDX, you can't do that in the Volvo or the Audi or any other entry in this segment. Now there is a big difference under the hood when you're comparing the Acura and the Infiniti. The Acura has considerably more horsepower, it's considerably faster 0 to 60 than this. Again, I haven't been able to 0 to 60 test this particular vehicle, but since nothing mechanically has changed since the 2014 model we tested, I expect it to run from 0 to 60 in the same 7 seconds. And if you get the hybrid model, you only add 1/10 of a second to that 0 to 60 time. That is, however, a full second slower than the Acura MDX. The current MDX and the Q7 are probably the fastest entries in this approximately 300 horsepower 3-row crossover segment. The Volvo XC90 with its 2-liter turbocharged engine is likely going to be just about as fast or possibly a little bit quicker, and if you opt for the top-end T6 engine, which is both turbocharged and supercharged, then it's nearly a second faster than the QX60. On the flip side, of course, the Acura MDX has that 9-speed automatic transmission, which is just not as smooth as this CVT. The Volvo XC90 is faster than this, of course, but it's going to be considerably more expensive. On the surface of things, the XC90 may seem like it's just as good of a deal as the QX60 because it does start just over $43,000 as well. However, that $43,000 model is a front-wheel drive 5-passenger version. It doesn't have a third row like we see right here in this QX60. If you want the third row in your XC90, you'll have to pay at least $49,800, and you do have to bump up to that T6 all-wheel drive model. The base price of the 7-seat Volvo is going to be about $6,000 more than this Infiniti, and if you adjust for the fact that we have that standard all-wheel drive system, it's still going to be about a $4,000 difference. Now you can get luxury features in that Volvo that you do not find in this Infiniti. Volvo's safety systems seem to be a little bit more advanced, a little bit more engaging than we see right here in this vehicle. You can, of course, get the stitched leather dashboard, stitched leather doors. Volvo has that 12.3-inch driver's side LCD cluster. We have the 4-corner adaptive air suspension and a variety of other luxury features, again, that you don't find in the Infiniti. However, you will pay significantly more for the Volvo with those features than you'll find right over here. Across the board, when comparably equipped, the Infiniti will be about $5,000 less than the Volvo. Even Volvo has been attracted by the lure of better handling and a firmer ride, so this is still going to be more comfortable out on the road even than the XC90 with the dynamic air suspension. The same thing goes for the Audi Q7. The Volvo is probably the best deal when it comes to European comparisons. This is going to be about $10,000 less than the new Audi Q7. On the flip side, of course, the QX60 is going to be notably more expensive than something like a Buick Enclave. The Buick Enclave lives in a world between this and the Nissan Pathfinder. The interior is nicer than the Nissan Pathfinder, but not as nice as the interior that we see right here in this Infiniti. You can't get real wood trim, you can't get a number of the features that we see in this particular model over there in the Buick. In addition, the Enclave definitely feels larger and heavier than this Infiniti does out on the road. The Infiniti has a solid, large, luxury crossover feel to it with a soft ride, but the Buick takes that to the next level because it's considerably heavier than this model. It's nearly 700 pounds heavier than the Infiniti, and it feels every pound of that weight out on the road. While I still think that the Volvo XC90 is my top pick in this particular segment, probably tied with the Audi Q7, the Infiniti QX60 is definitely worth looking at if you're looking for something a little bit more comfortable. As I keep saying, every other entry in this segment is trying to be the most sporting entry available, and that's not what Infiniti is doing with this QX60, even though they have sharpened it up a little bit for this year. Even though Volvo has a tradition of impeccable safety ratings and the Q7 now has 5 sets of latch anchors, this Infiniti is perhaps a little bit more practical for the average family out there with kids still in child seats. Because for all the latch anchors in the world, the Q7 still will not allow you to have a child seat latched in the second row and then allow adults to get into the third row. If your family has 2 children using the second row with booster seats or child seats, and the latch anchors can be used on that 40% passenger side, you can still get into the third row, and that makes this much more convenient for the average family out there than the XC90 or the Q7. Thanks for taking the time to check out this video. Again, I'm Alex Dykes, and this has been the 2016 QX60. Be sure and check out those related videos down there at the bottom of your screen, and I'll see you next week.